What's up guys, I'm J-Man, and welcome to another installment of Which is Better. Today we're going to be looking at one of the movies from the studio that just loves to interfere, Superman 2. So in case you're not familiar with the story, Richard Donner directed the first Superman film and had intended to direct the second one back to back. He was about 80% done with the second one when the studio that loves to interfere decided they wanted to go a different direction and he was let go from the production. Richard Lester was brought in to complete it, and there were several script changes and some new scenes were shot. It came out and was also a big hit, even though some of the cast admitted they weren't completely happy with it. Fast forward several years later, a new version surfaced, the Richard Donner cut, featuring several restored scenes and elements as originally intended by Dick Donner himself. It wasn't necessarily a complete version since some of it was actually just test footage and audition reels, but it was a lot closer to Donner's original vision as it could get. It was released, and even to this day, the consensus is that it far exceeds the theatrical cut. No doubt. If anything, this is the version of the movie that we should have gotten. Well, allow me to be contrarian once again and say that I actually kind of prefer the theatrical cut. Not to say that I don't like the Donner cut at all, it definitely has some merits over the Lester version, which I'll go into in a minute. But in terms of story and even character, there's actually a lot of ways I actually like the theatrical cut better. This is... Before I get started, I have to stress that none of this is fact. It's all strictly my opinion, so please don't be upset if you don't agree with me about anything. With that being said, let's look at the major differences of each version and see how they compare. Now this is one thing where I actually do kind of prefer the Donner cut. I don't know why they would change this. The movie doesn't necessarily lose anything or even gain anything by having it be a different bomb. In fact, if anything, it's basically the same principle, just a different setting. The Donner version basically picks up from the ending of the first one, where he throws one of the missiles out into space. In the Lester version, though, Superman literally destroys one of the most famous landmarks in the world and rips out an entire elevator instead of, just taking the bomb off the elevator and then chucking it out into space. So I gotta give it to the Donner cut on this one. I prefer him looking like a hero rather than a dumbass.
I believe this is your floor.
In both versions, Lois tries to get Clark to reveal himself as Superman by nearly getting herself killed. In the theatrical version, it happens after they've arrived at Niagara Falls and she jumps into the river. Clark saves her by discreetly giving her a tree branch and then pulling her out. In the Donner cut, however, it happens before they leave for Niagara and she jumps out the window. Clark speeds downstairs just before she reaches ground and uses his ice breath and laser eyes to save her. Personally, I prefer the theatrical cut, simply because it just seems more practical. In the Donner cut, Lois jumps out the window of her work building and Clark is forced to use his powers in full view of passing strangers, and it's a lot more of a contrivance that no one happened to see him use them. Except for maybe this couple, but I guess they're just too dumb to know what actually happened, so no big deal, I guess? In the theatrical cut, Clark reveals himself as Superman simply of his own choosing. He trips on the bear rug and gets his hand caught in the open fire. Lois thinks that he burned himself, so she tries to help, but sees his hand completely fine. Clark then decides to come clean and reveal himself as the Man of Steel. In the Donner cut, Lois brings out a gun that she got from who knows where and threatens to shoot him to get him to reveal himself.
What?
I definitely prefer the theatrical cut for a few reasons. One is because Lois using a gun just makes her look freaking psychotic. Even if it is just a blank, you don't scare someone like that. What are you, insane? Second reason is because it just makes Clark look like kind of an idiot. Yes, he's invincible, but I'm also sure he would be able to feel something hit him. I mean, he's called the Man of Steel, not the man of obliviousness to anything that touches him. Third is also just for practicality reasons. Firing a gun in a public hotel suite, you're lucky as hell no one heard the shot and are calling security. In the theatrical version, they definitely focus more on the love story in the movie.
I don't know why I did that.
Maybe you wanted to.
I don't think I did.
Well, maybe you didn't want to with your mind, but maybe you wanted to with your heart.
Is the writing cliched? Yeah, admittedly, but I'd rather have Clark choosing to come clean for himself rather than Lois scaring the piss out of him.
Gotcha.
So the way Clark gets his powers back and becomes Superman again in both versions is questionable, but again, I gotta give it to the theatrical cut. In the Donner cut, Jor-El's hologram somehow manifests itself into physical form and touches Clark, and that somehow gives him his powers back. I actually kind of think this brings out more questions than answers, because A, how did Jor-El know that he would want to give up his powers and then want them back, thus creating this hologram endowed with his powers, I guess? B, how the hell does this hologram take physical form? C, doesn't he get his powers from the sun? I mean, how does the touch of a hologram bring him back from human to Kryptonian again? In the theatrical cut, it's left more ambiguous. It ends with just him finding the green crystal that Lois dropped earlier and then cuts away. This is preferable because it leaves the audience to guess how he used it and makes his return as Superman seem all the more heroic. Not only that, but it's also got some deeper meanings behind it too. The whole time he's begging for someone to respond and admits his mistake, but by finding the crystal, it kind of shows that maybe his power lies deep within himself, which is the point of any good superhero. In a way, it's also meant for him to realize that the best way for him to make up for his mistake is to start from scratch and remember the reason for becoming Superman in the first place. I don't know, I guess I prefer to be left to guess for myself rather than seeing his powers be literally given back to him.
Dead, Jim.
So in the theatrical cut towards the end of the movie, Lois and Clark get into this whole emotional discussion about how they can't be together because he's Superman and he has a moral obligation to protect Earth and can't be in a relationship. So he eases her pain by giving her a memory-erasing kiss.
G-Loss, you okay? What happened?
Don't get me wrong, that is pretty ridiculous. Unfortunately, I think I can buy the Donner cut a lot less, actually, because in that one, it's basically the same cop-out as the end of the first movie. He literally goes back in time to when it all started, rendering the whole movie completely moot. This irritates me to no end because the problem with any movie that ends with a character going back in time to when it all started is basically saying the whole movie never should have happened in the first place. Not to mention, at this point he's pretty much taken the principles that his father taught him and chucked them out the window because now he's just reversing time and events however he wants. In the theatrical cut, everything that happens before that stupid kiss I actually really like because it's actually a very good scene with some amazing acting by Margot Kidder.
I like worrying about you.
Would you stop? Don't you know that this is killing me? Do you know what it's like to have you come in here every morning and not be able to talk to you?
This version is just lazy. Not to mention, he could have just done that after getting his powers back instead of wasting time and causing damage fighting the evil crew.
Never thought this thing would go the distance.
So earlier in the film, Clark confronts a man in a diner and gets into a fight with him. He gets his human ass handed to him, but at the end of the movie when he's Superman again, he goes back and gives the guy a lesson in manners. In the theatrical cut I like it a lot more because, simply put, it just makes more coherent sense. It actually feels more earned to go back and confront the man. Albeit it's out of petty revenge, but it's just more enjoyable when he kicks the guy's ass, whereas in the Donner cut, he already turned back time, which means he never met the guy before, so he's kind of beating up an innocent man.
Well, I've been, working out.
Yeah, those people have never seen you before, dumbass. Even I will admit, though, that it might be a little out of character for Superman to go back and beat up a complete stranger in a diner in either case, really, but story-wise, it just feels more earned.
This order's to go.
So in conclusion, both versions are good in their own way. I just personally prefer the theatrical cut over the Donner cut. I think the love story between Clark and Lois is better developed, and some alternate scenes just work better in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, there are other things I could have done without though. The kiss is still stupid, the bomb thing was unnecessary, and although I do appreciate the intent, it doesn't really make sense for Lara to be talking with Clark rather than Jor-El. But overall, the theatrical cut is still the one that I gotta go with. Now tell me, which version do you prefer? Whatever it is, don't be shy, leave a reply. Also be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter and support me on Patreon if you'd be so kind. And if you like this video, you can like, comment, and subscribe to the J-Man. Keep looking deep.